Do you tend to procrastinate? Do you want to have stronger willpower? As a clinical psychologist, I found that most of us have at least a few hardwired habits that keep us from being our best selves and living our best lives. So whether you're feeling defeated by broken resolutions or stressed out by a habit that keeps you feeling stuck, I can assure you that it truly is possible to shift your life for the better. Today, we'll dive into the art and science of getting unstuck with a habit change expert who will highlight 5 powerful habits you can embrace to create a life you love. And it won't stop there. We'll have some fantastic, easy to follow strategies to help you break those old habits and create healthy new ones. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real life question. Can you help me figure out why I keep failing at my New Year's resolutions? Every year, it's the same thing. I make my list of resolutions, but my willpower sucks. No matter what resolutions I set out for dieting, exercising, or work, I usually crumble by the end of the first week. My record is 17 days. I feel like such a failure. And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love. Please note, as this episode may contain sensitive information, listener discretion is advised. If you need support, please see the special links in the show notes.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Today, I'm joined by a very wonderful guest, Chris Loper, habit coach who focuses on behavioral change and productivity. Welcome to the podcast, Chris. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks, Carla. It's great to be here.
Well, before we launch into the meat and potatoes of today's podcast, can you tell our listeners just a little bit about what makes you you?
Well, what makes me me is what psychologists call zest, which is to say I'm a high energy person who loves life. I'm not one thing. I don't do one thing. Like I'm a tutor, a writer, a habit coach, a husband, an uncle, a skier, a board gamer, a bird nerd. But in all that I do, I show up with like energy, enthusiasm, and optimism.
I like that. So you embody zest. I
hmm
like that. Zest is good. It's a very close cousin to joy.
hmm
And I'm a big joy fan. So there, your zest, I'm joy. This should be a fantastic episode. All right. So when we look at the listener's question and the listener's writing in, it sounds like they're feeling pretty depressed and maybe a bit hopeless about perhaps years of resolutions that don't make it beyond maybe a couple weeks or a week and
Mhm.
at max 17 days. And I'm sure many of us can understand that and appreciate that and have empathy with that on some level. And for many people, they've been there because I believe that many resolutions, if I recall the research on it, often end by the time 6 days have passed.
Mhm.
And very, very few make it to the 2 month mark, and even fewer make it to the 21-day mark. And that is actually where real change starts to take roots. So, can you tell us, before we talk about those 5 important facets of habit change. And before we get into the actual steps people can take once they know those five keys, can you tell us a little bit about your habit coaching and the paradigm you work from?
Hmm. Well, most people, when they try to change their behavior, they their game plan is to force themselves to do it, which is to say they want to rely on brute force willpower. And that's not really much of a strategy. There are a whole variety of strategies that reduce the amount of willpower you need to do the behaviors and to do them consistently. And so my main program with folks is coaching them on how to use those strategies and how to troubleshoot when things don't go right, because things aren't always going to go right, and you kind of need to expect that. Um, Helping people apply the neuroscience of habit formation and the neuroscience of willpower in real time to make the changes they want to make.
I love where we're starting from because it is the foundation. And for many people, me included, there was a time in my life, and for many people, I hear this from clients all the time. They'll say, Dr. Carla, I don't have any willpower. I don't have any willpower.
Mhm.
And I let them know that sometimes it's far more than willpower. So let's start off with an explanation in your words about what is willpower and why isn't brute force willpower, to use your words, why isn't that sufficient?
Willpower is the capacity to do something that you don't feel like doing. Um, and it's it's being done in your brain, but it's kind of like a muscle. Really, your brain is like a bunch of muscles, and the ones you use more get stronger. But if you use a particular brain muscle a lot in one sitting or in one day, it gets tired. So, like the listener said, New Year's resolutions, plural. And that's what most people do is they set several resolutions. They are, I'm going to quit drinking and quit smoking. I'm going to start going to the gym and I'm going to start meditating. I'm going to start getting up at 6 a.m. every day. And it's too much. They're overloading themselves by giving themselves too much to do at one time, which is like, okay, I've never ran before. I'm going to run a marathon next week. So I'm going to start running 10 miles a day to get ready. It's like, you're just starting out. You got to go slow. And it's hard for people to accept like they need that patience. But if you adopt that patience, you can actually go much further in the long run.
Got it. So what you were saying is when we do the brute force willpower, I will do this, I will lose 20 pounds by the end of January, that rather than doing that really strong push ahead, where that muscle of willpower can get very tired.
Hmm.
And also, maybe if there's a hiccup and the person eats three cookies instead of
Hmm.
no cookies, then they give up altogether. It's like, oh
Hmm.
no, never mind. And then everything's thrown out the window, including the willpower, including the self-esteem and the self-confidence. So what you're saying is, and I'm very aligned with you on this, have a macro goal, a one simple macro goal, main
Hmm.
goal, such as I want to exercise 20 minutes a day. And then underneath that, the micro goals that help you be set up for success to achieve that. Is that where you're coming from? Something like that?
Yeah, yeah. I coach people to focus on one big change at a time
Mhm.
and to start small and focus on consistency and build it up really gradually. And so that way you're never kind of shocking your brain with this big major scary change and you're just kind of easing yourself into it, like gradually turning up the heat and, over time your creating new neural connections to make the behavior easier and more normal. And you're using a little bit of willpower, and whenever you increase the intensity of the behavior, you're using a little bit of willpower, but it's never too much. And so it's just like I'm lifting weights, and every week I add a little bit to the amount of weights I'm lifting, and so I'm getting stronger in a sustainable way.
I completely agree with you. And I'm thinking of the concept in psychology called optimal frustration. That when we have just enough frustration in a task, in a goal, in a resolution, it can actually, just like we'll keep using the analogy of lifting weights. In when we're looking at lifting weights, we want, if we're not used to a 5 pound weight, we don't want to go straight to a 20 pound weight. That'll be too much. We'll drop
Hmm.
the weight or never pick it up and we'll feel hopeless.
Hmm.
Whereas if we want to lift a 5 pound weight and we start with a 3 pound weight, and a few reps a day for maybe a couple of weeks, then move to a 4 pound weight or sometimes straight to a 5 pound weight, then we don't have that exhaustion, that high level of frustration that makes us drop the weight and walk away altogether.
Hmm. Yeah.
Aha, that makes
Yes.
perfect sense. And I'm thinking, funny aside, um, I have my motorcycle license and hadn't ridden for
Oh,
years because
wow.
I was riding since I was a kiddo. And I think one of the only ones in my family who really loved motorcycles. Anyway, as an adult, I wanted to get back into it. And instead of going straight for, you know, a bike that was 125 or something. I went for a Harley, and it was a beautiful Harley and one of the smaller ones. They don't get very small, but it was one of the smaller ones. And I dropped it in the driveway
Oh, no.
and then, rode it some more and then dropped it in the driveway again another
Hmm.
day because there was a pine cone and it slid out from underneath
Oh,
me.
wow.
And I was very worried that I had hurt my beautiful pearly white Harley, but
Yeah.
I never rode it again. The
Hmm.
frustration was too high. The bike was too much. It was, that weight, literally, the weight was too much for my tiny being and
Yeah.
and my skill level. So when we do that, and I never went back to that bike, I sold it and got on with my life. And
Hmm.
so when we look at that, going back to the listener's question, and boy, was that a pretty bike. I named it Trouble, by the way. Anyway, I think I was the trouble, not the bike. But when we look at that and think of how easy it is to set our aspirations high, especially people who are fairly high achievers, you want to reach for that star, and you want to get there and you want to get there quickly. So whether it's losing 20 pounds or being a yoga expert or, as you were saying, running that marathon, some of us want to do it tomorrow. And we don't realize that that really heavy duty approach can work against us. And that sounds like it's a big piece of what you focus on.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take it to the listener's question for a minute. And
Hmm.
let's imagine that this question, that they're reaching out and saying, I would like to, because it sounds like they've had various resolutions over the years:
Hmm.
work, exercise, and diet. Let's imagine that they want to give up, let's say, most fast food and eat a more wholesome diet. So
Hmm.
let's not make it about weight. Let's just, or maybe they want
Hmm.
to, let's make it a little more complicated. Let's say they would also like to reduce weight over time. Set us up for success here. Give us the steps on how to get a healthier diet while also possibly losing some pounds along the
Hmm.
way.
Yeah. So I would start by looking for the low-hanging fruit, um, which is maybe a bad metaphor in this case. Uh, which is like, okay, are you keeping junk food in your house? Like, get rid of it and don't buy it because then it's right there. It's too easy to access. Um,
Okay.
so it's not like you can never have unhealthy food, but like don't let it live in your house. Like make it so that you have to work for it if you want to eat it. You're like, oh, I want a cookie. Like, well, we don't have any cookies. Do I really want to get in the car in the rain and drive 20 minutes and then that to get cookies? Like, I don't want it that bad. So then you won't do it. Um, so that's environmental design is like, stock your house with, easy, healthy food and get rid of the easy to access unhealthy food. The second piece I would encourage people to do is plan ahead. Like, what are you going to eat and when, and like, you know, have a dedicated day of the week for grocery shopping and food prep, that gets you set up for, 3 to 5 days worth of food that's going to be good for you. So when you get home from work and you're exhausted and there's nothing you don't have this, oh, there's nothing in the fridge. I don't have a plan. Let's just go to McDonald's. Like, no, like most people do this on Sunday because they work Monday through Friday. It's like, no, figure out some meals that you want to make or one or two big pots of stuff that you want to eat over a few days. Go to the store, chop veggies, cook it up, and you're ready to go. And then you don't have to do it when you're exhausted.
Excellent. So we have the environment,
Hmm.
create the environment that sets you up for success, basically. Make sure if you're wanting to have a healthier diet that you have carrots, apples, celery. Those become the sweets, and then you have all of your other good things around you so that you don't have the temptation.
Hmm.
But B, you really have this environment that feels good and feels yummy and feels nutritious and healthy.
Yeah.
And then I love the idea of planning ahead. And I know for a lot of our listeners that might feel like, oh no, I don't want to do meal prep and planning on a Sunday. Yet, if you embrace it as an idea of, wait a second, whether I'm single or have a family, this is something we can do that's fun,
Hmm.
and we can make a fun time out of it, and we can have the glass containers to put everything in and have these beautiful chilies and
Hmm.
vegetarian chili or whatever it might be, or a lasagna, and they
Hmm.
can all be frozen ahead.
Yep.
And so though it may take a chunk of that Sunday, if we make it fun and make it enjoyable, when
Oh
we
yeah.
add that in, every task is easier when it becomes a bit of play
Hmm. Oh
and
yeah.
connect. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Totally.
And
Like when I'm cooking, there's music on, there's maybe some dancing, you know, where I call that the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down strategy. Uh,
absolutely,
uh,
I'm with you on that. You can take almost any task, and if you shift your mindset to find something beautiful in it,
mhm.
cleaning the bathroom becomes maybe not fun, but it becomes an act of like, oh yeah, this is good. Immediate gratification of seeing the sink going from toothpaste covered to nice and sparkly. That feels good. So,
Mhm.
okay, we have these, and I think those little pieces, when we learn to look for them, they become positive reinforcement, because instead of seeing every task as, shackles and these chains on us, we can see some of these tasks as, oh, this feels good. Because caring, I remember one of my first insights into this was reading Thomas Sowell's Care of the Soul. I'm sorry, Thomas More's Care of the Soul. It's one of my favorite books. And he talks about caring for the home, creating these rituals, and we are and we our bodies are also a home. We create rituals around us that take some of these mundane tasks and make them sacred and imbue them with, oh, this is a gift. Cooking this food is a gift to my body, it's a gift to my soul, it's a gift to my kiddos or my partner. It's a game changer, don't you think, doing some of those mindset shifts?
Yeah. I mean, we say things to ourselves like, "Oh, I have to go to the grocery store." And I'm like, "Well, actually the grocery store is kind of a miracle. Like For most of history, you couldn't just like go somewhere that was 5, 10 minutes away and have a building full of food that you could easily purchase and then go home. Like that's a modern miracle that we take for granted. So I'm like, you get to go to the grocery store. Like it's awesome that it exists and that you can afford to buy food. Like that's a privilege that did not exist for most of human history and still does not exist for many people today.
I love this. So now we've added another one, reframe to see things in the positive. And you're right, grocery stores are a miracle. In the not too distant past, people had to take their covered wagon or their horse
Yeah,
or
right.
go by foot to the nearest town. Let's hope it wasn't a ghost town, and find that local purveyor of goods. And even then, before that, if you didn't have the goods and your neighbor didn't have the goods and the
You're going hungry.
people, yep, you didn't have the goods. So, all right. What else can help this listener in particular, but all of our listeners, take another positive step toward? So we now have the environment, we have the planning ahead, we have this reframing to have things in a positive mindset. What else?
Hmm. Well, I've worked with a lot of clients who've had trouble with eating too much fast food, and they always try to negotiate, okay, I'm gonna eat less. I'm only gonna have it, once a week or something. I'm only gonna have it if I'm going out with people or something. And pretty much all of them have found that that strategy doesn't work, that they're actually kind of addicted to it because the food is designed to be addictive and they need to treat it like a drug and go 100% all in on never eating fast food. And when they make that shift, suddenly they're good to go. They never have to choose again. They never have to, they drive by a fast food restaurant and they go like, "Oh, maybe today I can cheat." And it's like, "No, you've already decided never again." The way, 10 years ago I decided, never going to drink or use drugs again. You you're
Got
done.
it.
Yeah.
Got it. And it's interesting because there are many experts who say, and I'm not countering you, I actually agree with you. There are many experts, so listeners, no matter what you're reading or listening to, you always find there are all these experts with different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And for some experts, when it comes to habit change, they'll say, "Oh, allow yourself that giant-sized hamburger or that 3 scoop of ice cream once a month." And I'm not going to say that that's not okay. What, especially as you're working on the initial stages of habit change, I agree with you, Chris. Working on those initial stages till you get that core, having things be off limits, and so that you don't have to negotiate. So you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to say, "Oh, well, maybe I'll just have 1 scoop," and you end up with three, or
Yeah.
you say, "I won't have the box of candy," but you get so obsessed with it that you have 3 boxes, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if we look at what you're saying, which is don't negotiate with that which you know is destructive to you.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, find a healthy replacement. And
Yeah.
that's what I find. So if you're used to it, I think in the distant past it was See's candy, and I loved mint truffles, and having three
Mm-hmm.
mint truffles was just like heaven to me. But I
Mm-hmm.
realized, whether it's 3 mint truffles or it's just not, there are other things that I could be putting in my body as a treat. And um, what I decided to do is to shift towards seeing what I really, really liked, what my body really, really wanted was things like pineapple or
Yeah.
blueberries or
Mm-hmm.
raspberries. And so I was like, oh, well, these are just as good. In fact, they're even better. So now if you gave me a choice between 3 chocolate truffles and, you know, a basket of organic raspberries,
Mm-hmm.
hands down, I'm going to take the organic raspberries. It doesn't mean that I occasionally won't want to nibble at a truffle,
Mm-hmm.
but That's later in the game. So when we realize once we get stronger, so I'm glad you brought up the piece about sobriety. And I know we're going to get to some of these healthy pieces in a bit, but I think that's why AA, and for many people who have addictions, that substance, and we're not saying that food is, well, as addictive or as bad for you as alcohol addiction, but it can be in its own ways. But when people who struggle with an alcohol addiction or another addiction, in if they make those negotiations, especially in that first year, sometimes
Hmm.
it's a lifetime,
Hmm.
one leads to two, leads to
Yep.
five, leads to, and then you go down into that abyss. So if you make a deal with yourself, because on whatever this resolution is, whether it's no fast food or no alcohol, if you make that promise to yourself for good reason,
Hmm.
and you say, I value myself so much and I no longer want to reward myself with this or compartmentalize my thoughts or numb myself out with that. And instead, I might give myself the gift of psychotherapy, or I might give myself the gift of going to AA meetings.
Hmm.
But seeing that we don't have to negotiate with a substance that harms us,
Yeah.
whatever that is. We can negotiate with ourselves to find something to replace it that feels better. What
Hmm.
do you think of that?
Yeah, I agree. And that thing that's better isn't necessarily tangible. It can just be the feeling of pride when you make a better choice. So, when someone says like, "Oh, I really want it. I really want fast food." I'm like, "Yes, you do." And you've also told me that you want to be healthier. So, you want both of these things. So, when you have that feeling, ask yourself, "What do I want more?" And we're normalizing the idea that you have competing wants and then trying to help them remember that they do actually have the other thing that they want. Because in the moment, the bright, shiny, tasty thing grabs your attention, and then you forget that you have these other goals. And,
Absolutely.
you know, and then if you make the better choice for yourself, feast on that. Like, be like, oh, that's like me, and feel proud of yourself for it.
Positive reinforcement, one of my favorite, favorite, favorite pieces of change. That
Hmm.
often when we do something not so well, we have that three cookies instead of no cookies,
Hmm.
or we don't exercise, we really berate ourselves for
Hmm.
making that choice. We forget that when we do something well, whether it's going a day without um, going to a fast food restaurant, or whether we go a week without drinking, every one of those days, because it's all choice. And
Hmm.
when we congratulate ourselves and say, well done, you, like you're amazing, speaking to yourself, you're amazing, you did this. You are hardwiring your brain in new ways. And for
Hmm.
as long as a habit's been with us, and for many of us, habits have been with us for not just a decade, but sometimes for a lifetime. And sometimes it was a pattern observed from a parent. So it's part of our neurobiology because we were wiring that pattern in before we knew what patterns were. That when we realize, wait a second, I'm taking this entire freeway in my brain and I am changing it. I am
Hmm.
shifting to another freeway that I am creating all on my own. And man, those freeways are hard to create and it takes a lot of effort and mindfulness, but I'm doing it. I'm
Hmm.
creating this detour to this lovely new freeway. And wow, it's a lot of work, but I'm doing a good job. We forget that on a neurobiological level, that is what habit change is.
Hmm.
And that's the beauty of neuroplasticity that no matter how old you are, listeners, doesn't matter if you're 20 years old or 80 years old, our brains, they can be changed.
Hmm.
And I just think it's fascinating because as we change, sometimes we get back into that old freeway and then we give up altogether, as it sounds like our listener does. But instead, it's a matter of realizing you're on the old freeway and going, oh, I want to get off this freeway. I want to stop. I want to turn around and I want to get onto my new freeway because I like my new freeway and I'm creating that one and it feels really good.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you. What do you think then? We have all of these beautiful pieces about not negotiating, about reframing, um, really planning ahead, creating a healthy environment that sets us up for success. What do you think about the power of having support, whether it's from a best friend, partner, somebody at work, someone in your family, someone who can be there too. When you forget to applaud yourself, they can be there to applaud you and give you a little boost.
So social support is good in most cases, but we want to be careful about telling other people about our goals. There are scenarios where it is helpful, and there are scenarios where it's actually counterproductive.
Please tell.
Yes. So if you are quitting something, like I'm not eating sugar this month, or I'm never drinking again, that is a tell everybody kind of goal because you want social accountability for it. You want people to be aware at social gatherings that you're not consuming so they don't offer it to you.
Hmm.
And and you might want if you're doing something really hard like getting sober, you probably want accountability buddies to be checking in with you regularly to make sure you're still on the wagon. Um, but if you're doing a goal that is about you making something, like starting a business, writing a book, or you like, I'm getting in shape, I'm going to start going to the gym, I'm going to start running, then I would only tell other people very sparingly and very strategically. Because it turns out announcing a goal like that to a friend, a family member, a coworker, it makes you feel good and your brain gives you the reward as though you've already done the thing, but you haven't done the hard work yet. And research shows it actually demotivates you to do the work. So
Say more.
when I wrote a book, I didn't tell anybody until I had completely finished a draft. I printed it out and I put it on the kitchen table and I said, hey, Christina, guess what? I wrote a book. Because I know if I talk about it, then I feel this weird combination of like, I said it, but I haven't done it yet, which is this weird pressure thing. But working on it in secret, then you get it done. Or, if someone's like gonna run a half marathon, in 4 months, they don't really need to tell anybody. They need to start running, and the results are going to speak for themselves.
Got it. So if I hear you right, what you're saying, look at the situation and see if it's one where social support will help you and help you stay accountable. And
Right.
if you're someone who can do something, I'm thinking of people who are running a marathon or want to run a marathon, but they're very gregarious in nature and they really have their group of runner friends. So
Well, then
they're,
you're good. That's a great example of it helps to
it
have partners who do
helps.
the same thing as you.
Hmm.
It's like, oh yeah, no, I have a buddy I go to the gym with every week. Like that's a very helpful thing to have. Sometimes people are like, I really want to get into hiking, but like I can never get myself to do it. I'm like, make a plan with a friend. It's Tuesday. Make a plan for Saturday. Now you're committed to go with the buddy. You're not going to back out because they're counting on you. And it's going to be more fun because there's someone there.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying, there are situations, and listeners, this will be for you to decide what they are. We're putting it out into the world. if that feels demotivating to you, like I might feel like I've already accomplished it and it takes the joy out of my sales, then you may want to keep it to yourself. But in a situation where you're saying, hey, telling other people that I'm not eating sugar so that when I go to their home and I'm declining dessert, there's no pressure, and I'm going out, that they don't care that I'm not, having a beer with them or whatever. And in
Hmm.
fact, they may be supportive.
Hmm.
Okay, this takes me in another direction. Then I want to weave to the five key habits. But let's talk about the situations because this might apply to our listeners' question. We don't know what their environment is like. But
Hmm.
oftentimes, and I hear this from clients a lot, when they do something like dry January,
Hmm.
and I'm not a big fan of a change for a month. I'm more of a
Hmm.
change. Let's try and keep it going if it's a
Yeah.
healthy one, right?
Right.
But let's look at what happens in some cases where, whether it's envy or something else at work, just very poor boundaries or very poor awareness. When you state a goal and you think you're hoping that people will support you and honor that goal, but then you get into a situation where people might know you're dieting or might know you're trying not to drink, and
Hmm.
they are plying you with cupcakes or candy, or they're just won't, stop offering you a beer or a glass of wine, even though they know that that's working against your goals. How
Mm.
do you handle that?
Well, sometimes people do that um, as an unconscious defense mechanism because, like, if somebody has a drinking problem and they see me stop drinking, they they see me as like a mirror, and now they're kind of seeing their own problem reflected in me, and that's uncomfortable. And they would feel more comfortable if I was drinking again, because then they're like, I'm not alone. I'm okay, you know. So that's a reason that people do that kind of thing is like they feel bad about themselves and they want to fix that. And the shortest way to fix that is have everyone else be doing it, because then if everyone's doing it, it's totally fine. Um,
I agree
uh,
with you 100% that oftentimes they get very uncomfortable when they see somebody else making the change they wish they could make. So if they can just put everything back into homeostasis where everybody's doing what they are quote unquote supposed to
mhm,
be doing, then they feel better. And I have seen the issue with envy where somebody is envious because they want to lose that 20 pounds or they want to stop drinking. And the other
yeah.
person is there right in front of them holding strong, and they're saying to themselves, often unconsciously, I want to interfere with that. I don't want that
Hmm.
happening because I want that.
Yeah.
Which, and
So,
they're tied together.
yeah. So with that in mind, that it has nothing to do with you and has everything to do with them, and that it's actually kind of a cry for help from them if they're behaving that way. You're like, you get to see that as an opportunity to lead by example and be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize they actually like have a problem. I thought I was the only one, and like, and what they really need from me is an example of someone holding strong. Even though it's going to be uncomfortable for them now, that example might serve them down the road.
Beautifully stated. I love that idea of leading by example, that when we are making healthy choices and we are able, not that we want to be making them for other people, but we can see that when we walk our talk and we are able to hold strong, we become a role model, not just for ourselves, but for people. And people are often watching and we don't even know they're watching. And when they see us making changes, so many times I hear that from clients where they're saying, I'm watching my best friend make these changes, or I'm watching somebody, my coworker at work, and every week they come in, they look, a little bit leaner, and they're bringing in, this carrot and hummus tray to work and this and that. And there's a sense of admiration, like if they can do it, so can I.
Hmm.
And so each one of us, when we live, as you say, in a strong way, in accord with what we want in our lives, not only is that self-motivating if we pause to say, you're doing a good job. And I don't think that that lacks humility at all. Some people think that that's not being humble. I actually think it's different. I think when we pause to look ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, you're doing a good job, I think, in my perspective, that that is really embodying self-love, self-appreciation, and allowing us to be stronger and have stronger self-esteem. Why is that? And I believe it lacks hubris, be pride, because it's just giving the self a positive mirror to look into. When many times, for many of us, we grew up with negative mirrors,
Hmm.
parents, coaches, teachers who said negative things to us. So we learned through that mirror to think poorly of ourselves. So much of it, I think, is valid self correction.
Hmm.
What do you think of that piece?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's it's very hard to love yourself in a world that profits from you not loving yourself.
Oh,
You know,
that practically gives me tears because it's so true. It's so
yeah.
true. It is so hard to love yourself in a world that makes so much money off of us looking at that face in the mirror and hating who we are.
Hmm.
A world that profits from us looking outside for validation and outside for alcohol, drugs, things to make us feel better, when the true secret to feeling better is inside and feeling that love and that joy of making just one or two good choices for the better a day. We don't have
Hmm.
to be perfect. That's what I love about imperfect love. We're
Hmm.
never asked to be perfect. We're
Yeah.
asked to keep taking those baby steps forward that allow us to get just a bit better every day. It's nothing.
Hmm.
If we set our sights on being perfect, exercising perfectly in that new goal, reaching for the stars, transforming our work life, transforming our relationship, all on whatever date we set for ourselves, that's a lot of pressure. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. So you've just set us a beautiful foundation for all of those pieces. Anything else before we jump to the 5 habits that you see as being really important for living your best life?
Um, One more piece on establishing a new habit. So we've talked a lot about quitting something. A lot of people are at this time of year trying to instill a new habit, such as exercise or meditation or reading. And where most people flounder on that is they don't get crystal clear on a plan of action. And so this is something I always do with clients when they establish this is what they want to do. I'm like, okay, so tell me about that. What do you mean? I'm like, well, when are you going to do it? Meaning, like, at what time of day or at what specific order in your normal routine of the day? Where does it happen? Does it have a dedicated location? Like, I have a meditation chair, I have a home gym. Like, that's where the stuff happens. We don't want it to be occurring at a random place at a random time because then you're not grooving a neural pathway consistently. Um, I get really clear on how it's going to happen. It's like, yeah, my exercise routine is just crazy consistent because if I don't have to choose what I'm doing, then I don't have to use any brain power for that. And all my brain power is reserved for the willpower to get started. Um, so if you're whatever you're going to do, get clear on when, where, and how you're going to do it, and it will be a lot easier.
All right. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Listeners, we touched on that a bit toward the beginning when we were talking about a macro goal and then those micro goals. And that's another way of seeing what Chris was just throwing out when, offering to us. When you, and I love how you said we're getting rid of the old habit. Nature abhors a vacuum. It does not like an open space. Something's going to rush in to fill it. If we don't fill it mindfully with something new, so for example, if you say, hey, I'm going to stop eating mm, a big juicy cheeseburger through the drive-through, that's fine, but we want to have a replacement. Otherwise, in that vacuum of driving home from work or whatever it is, you're going to swing into that fast food restaurant because there's a vacuum. You have nothing to fill it with. It's human behavior. It's not your fault. You're not bad, listeners. It's just human behavior. If you say, hey, I'm going to give up drinking, if you don't have some sort of self-soothing practice, which is why psychotherapy and drinking often go really, or giving up drinking often go very, very well together. You need some practice, some self-soothing behavior
Hmm.
to help you. Otherwise, you're going to come home from work or stop at that bar and do what you've always done,
Hmm.
only because the pathway in your brain is taking there. You have to give it a detour option.
Hmm.
So if you're saying to yourself, here is my goal, this is my main goal, which might be giving up fast food, perhaps we'll just use that because it's easier. Then underneath it, you want that's the macro goal, the main goal. Then underneath it, you want those 4 or 5 very clear steps that set you up for success. So you don't have to think about it. So you already have, well, I'm going to have, as we talked earlier, and you were, offering great tips, create the home environment, clear out the fast food, do all of these things that allow that new habit to be so much easier
Hmm.
because we're humans and we take that path of least resistance. So
Yeah.
we have to be prepared for that. We have to
Hmm.
anticipate what the normal human being is going to do, especially if we're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or stressed. We are
Hmm.
going to take that detour toward the old habits. So listeners, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, stressed, HALTS. That's
Hmm.
the acronym. So if you're in any of those states, that's when it's especially helpful to have a plan.
Hmm.
Okay, so thank you. That was a really great ending on that piece, affirming some of these really core principles. So let's talk about the 5 habits that tend to set us up for a successful, healthy, happy, joy-filled life.
Okay. So the number one is sleep hygiene, which is to say, not just getting enough sleep, but getting high quality sleep. Um, this is the foundation of everything because if you're tired, your brain will be working as well. You'll be less happy, less healthy, less intelligent. You'll have less willpower, which is going to make it harder to do all the other good things you want to do. Most people, the number one thing getting in the way of good sleep is tech. So a phone, a tablet, a computer, a TV. Those things are giving off high energy blue light, and that is disrupting melatonin production, making it so you're going to sleep too late, having a harder time getting into deep sleep, and so on. And so you're just not getting a nice restful night. And so the next day is harder, your willpower is less, you make poor choices. Maybe you're on screens again too late again, or you have caffeine too late in the day because you were tired, and you end this in kind of a vicious cycle. So,
Beautifully stated. And I agree with you. And then people often will say, well, I didn't get enough sleep and I'm feeling grumpy, or I'm not at my best, or I'm not focused. Absolutely. Most of us need, the vast majority of people need 7 to 8 to 8.5 hours of sleep a night. And we make those little negotiations with myself. Oh, just one more doom scrolling episode, one more round
Mm-hmm.
on here, one more, you
Mm-hmm.
know, Netflix on that. And when we make those deals, we are depriving ourselves of that ability to get that crucial foundation of sleep. So thank you. So that's
Yeah.
number one habit,
Mm-hmm.
listeners, good sleep, excellent sleep when possible. Um, what's number two?
Number two is exercise. Um, this is probably the most bang for your buck out of any positive action habit, um, in terms of what it's going to do for your brain. Most people focus on exercise in terms of how it's going to improve their body, which is certainly true. It makes you healthier and stronger. But the number one reason I exercise every day is because it makes me happier. It helps me handle stress. It makes me sharper, helps me with focus. It increases my mental endurance. And most people aren't aware of all those brain benefits. And so, you know, in January, tons of people get gym memberships or start exercise habits and with the goal of transforming their body. And they quit within a month because they don't see any big visible changes. Because it takes a really long time to like sculpt your body and change how it looks. So if that's what you're focused on, you're not getting a reward right away. But if you focus on the brain benefits, you get a reward immediately. I exercised this morning, I had a better day. And if I get a reward immediately every day, I'm going to be motivated to keep going.
100% behind you, Chris. I am, for me, one of the ways I'm able to begin my day and do a long day is that I begin every morning with a 5 mile, very fast paced, almost run walk.
Hmm.
And it is not only is it a detox, it recalibrates, it sets the stage for a really wonderful, resilient day. Listeners, you don't have to do 5 miles. Research shows that a 12-minute walk can boost your mood for up to 3 hours. And when we realize we're also getting sunshine, and even if it's a gray, cloudy day, if you learn to enjoy nature and just enjoy being outside, and
Hmm.
that you don't have to have, a park near you. You can walk on city streets. You can walk in a parking lot. You can learn to just zone out and just be wherever you are because you're turning inward as well. And if you have the benefit of being in nature, nature is also a wonderful de-stressing environment to be in. So I am with you. And then if you can't get outdoors and you're doing yoga inside or some sort of stretching inside, all of those things, if we reframe, I'm a big believer in reframing. Instead of I have to exercise or I have to stretch, when we reframe it to, I really want to give myself this
Hmm.
gift of all of these feel good neurotransmitters coursing through my body
Yeah.
and all of the, cortisol being pushed out of my body, then what's not to love? And again, it doesn't have to, whatever somebody wants to do, whether it's 12 minutes or 2 hours, just get into the habit of doing it and seeing it as a gift to yourself. When we make it a reward, it's a
Hmm.
game changer. It's such a game changer.
Yeah.
So brilliant. All right. Your third tip is fascinating.
Yeah. This is probably the most
Please,
surprising one.
please do tell.
So, number three is daily wisdom. I think this is very overlooked in the world of self-improvement, but I found it to be absolutely critical. If you can adopt a habit of taking in good ideas each morning, your life is just going to change for the better. So that could be reading from a book of daily wisdom, such as the Daily Stoic. It could be um, listening to some sort of wisdom podcast every day, or there's a great service called Heroic that summarizes self-improvement books, and they have tons of content on their paid app, and even, still tons of content for free on YouTube. Short little videos feeding you good ideas every day. And the point is not that you need this new idea every day. Most of it's not new. Most of it's stuff you already know, but you need the reminder. And I've found that I'm just so much more likely to act wisely during the day if I have consumed some wisdom in the morning.
I love that tip because it's so true. Our minds get filled, often from dawn to dusk, with whatever we're being fed by social media. A lot of it is a bit on the mindless end or trying to
It's
get
like
us
junk food for your
it
brain.
it I didn't want to be unkind, but I must concur. And it feels good in the moment, but for some people it feels really good. But research shows there are plentiful downsides to it.
Hmm.
And not that we have to, I know when I have clients who go on a social media diet, I've never had one say they regretted it. They
Right.
say, I have more time in my day. I'm less stressed. I'm not comparing myself. I feel better about myself. I
Hmm.
feel like I'm not prone to buying as much stuff to try to make myself feel better for not looking or being like that person or that, ad, whatever it is. So I love the daily doses of wisdom. And I
Hmm.
agree with you, whether it's reading, whether it's a podcast, a piece that I really like for daily wisdom, especially if you like things that you can touch and feel, are cards, conversation starter cards or
Oh.
mindfulness cards.
Hmm.
And there are many beautiful ones. And you just gave me an opportunity. I'm going to reach in here and grab the ones that I created that are new. Um, because they're reflection and oracle cards, and they're
Okay.
based on my Imperfect Love book. And I'll just pull one to give you an idea, Chris and
Hmm.
listeners. This is the one that comes up, and there's a cat. Oh, you're a cat lover. And here
Uh-huh.
it is. There's a cat. And that artist is Mark Ed. But anyway, the card on the opposite side says thoughts. By mindfully gaining control over unproductive thoughts that foster negativity, we bring healthier dynamics into our relationships. This ongoing intentional process fosters increased love and respect for the self and others. And then, and I listeners, I pulled this randomly, but it so fits with today's what we're talking about. Then there's a prompt for self-reflection.
Hmm.
Do negative or self-sabotaging thought patterns tend to work against you or your relationships? And so if you take a card like that and just leave it out for the day,
Hmm.
and refer to it or look at it, it's in your psyche and you're
Hmm.
thinking about it. So then you have a chance to look in the case of this card, what are the thoughts I have that might be fostering negativity, or if my focus is on habit change, what are my thoughts about habit change? And we've been talking about that today because often our thoughts on habit change. I love that that card came up. It's just,
Hmm.
it's so amazing because perhaps for our listener, the underlying thoughts are of resistance, of I don't want to be doing this.
Hmm.
Something in me is telling me to do it. But if we get, and I don't know the listener, but if that listener dives in to see what are my underlying thoughts about habit change, do I see it as an opportunity? Does it feel like a blessing? Does it feel wonderful? Or do I feel like it's something that I'm being forced to, like mom and dad or a teacher were forcing me?
Hmm.
Depending upon what the underlying thought pattern is, will change the outcome, because when we choose to do something because we want to do it, because we see the benefit,
Yeah.
the, the new habit is so much more likely to be meaningful, and it is much more likely to stick. And research shows that again and again. So we want to be able to look at our thoughts on that. So anyway, going back to your mindfulness piece, that is what we just did, is all an act of mindfulness, an act of wisdom creation. Because the more we understand ourselves in a non judgmental way, which is part of being wise, the better we do, whether it's with habit change or any other part of our lives. So beautiful, Chris. All right, wisdom now. Number four is also a bit of surprise because
Mm.
people might not understand the importance of this step. So please do tell.
Number four is deep work, which refers to taking mental tasks seriously. Things like writing, studying, projects at work. These things require a lot of brain power to do, and you'll do them much better if you can get into a state we call deep work. This comes from Cal Newport, who has a book of the same name. We live in a world of distractions, and we make the mistake of defaulting to distraction all the time. We get a new device, notifications are on. We are trying to do a really difficult work project, and we also have our phone out and turned on right next to us. And so we're constantly multitasking, which we're actually incapable of doing when it's cognitive tasks. We we end up switch tasking, flipping rapidly from one task to the next, never really given any task our full attention or full brain power. And so our work ends up being worse. It takes longer. It's more frustrating. We're more stressed. And we're just generally less effective in the world. So I really encourage people to practice monotasking and putting distractions away when you're going to do serious work so that you can actually go deep.
Love this one. I agree with you. The myth of multitasking. I have
Hmm.
people tell me all the time, I can multitask, I can multitask. When your attention is split, and a good example of that is having conversations with people. People think that they can have this important conversation while they're on their laptop or on their phone and watching television in the background, and they come away not having heard the person, and the person feels, you know, not attuned to, and all of these things. And I agree with you, whether it's work or anywhere else, if we're switching tasks, which is exactly what we're doing, we are
Hmm.
less productive on all of them. And I love tying this back, as you said, it makes you feel, you know, not only less rewarded because you're not doing your best at everything, but then you're stressed and you've lost some patience. And guess where this takes us with our whole habit we're trying to change? So if we go back to the listener's question, this listener is trying to, you know, not eat unhealthy food. Well, now they're stressed. Now they're
Hmm.
probably a little angry. And what are they going to, what's their default? It will be much more likely to go back to an old, more hardwired pattern than
Hmm.
to that new detour they're creating that feels tempting but not so accessible.
Hmm.
All right. Thank you. Love that one. And also reminds me, deep works reminds me of flow state.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
I love flow state listeners. It's that place you have likely been there at some point in your life where you're in such a space of ease and rhythm, whether you're writing a book or doing a work task or even outside gardening, whatever it
Hmm.
is, creating something, and time is gone. It's you and your task, and you just have this really intimate flow with it. It's absolutely a wonderful state to be in. So, okay, deep work. All right, last but not least, we are going into number five, and that is also something that our listeners might not expect you to talk about, but let's do it. I'm in agreement.
Number five is sobriety. And I don't mean that people need to completely abstain from alcohol or other drugs. Instead, what I mean is that we need to be capable of sobriety and comfortable with it. Um, and if you can't be sober for some length of time, if you find yourself extremely uncomfortable with sobriety, it, it's a good sign that you actually have a problem. But most, a lot of people, when they become adults, they learn that I get home from work and I need to relax, and so that means I have a drink. Or I'm at a social gathering and I'm supposed to be having fun, and that means I have to drink. And you don't have to use drugs to relax, and you don't have to use drugs to have fun. And it's really important to remember that. Like when I got sober, I had to remember what it was like to be a kid, because that's the last time I had been sober. And it was like, oh, yeah, when I was a kid, fun was just fun. You didn't have to enhance it with drugs. And if I wanted to relax, I just relaxed. Like I didn't need a substance to calm my mind down in order to relax. So I would encourage people to reflect on that and try to remember what it's like to, take care of yourself without any chemical help.
Beautifully put. And listeners, if you do have issues with sobriety, with alcohol or other substances, remember there is support out there, loads of it. This is
Hmm.
not a blame or shame podcast. It is all about mental health and wellness and shifting things. And if that's something that you want to shift, there are plenty of resources. The road is long, and again, it's habit. It's habit, and when we make a commitment to changing habits, maybe we don't do it perfectly the first time out of the gate, but when we make a commitment in the long run, I've seen so much incredible change occur in my clients over time. And I'm 100% believer that, humans are amazing, amazing beings and miracles. And I agree with you. Being in a place of sobriety, for me, my personality type is I don't need substances to find joy or self-soothe, because I have my natural way of being, but also I've learned over time a lot of coping strategies for
Hmm.
if I am stressed, and I've done a lot of self-work to clean out the baggage that many people use substances to not look at the baggage. So, listeners, neither Chris nor I are saying it's an easy road to get to sobriety if that's something you struggle with. Believe me, I've had people in my life who have struggled tremendously. But what it does mean is if you have a commitment to it and you take those steps, that it can be part of your plan for overall healthy habits that will
Hmm.
support you in your goals in the long run. So, oh my goodness, Chris, thank you so much. Are there any other pieces that you'd like to offer to our listeners?
Hmm. Um, I want to circle back to where we started on, New Year's resolutions, plural, rather than just one,
Mhm.
because the mindset behind the one at a time is long-term thinking. And, it's so natural and normal to I want to change it all right now. I just want to fix it. I want to fix all the things and be done. And it doesn't ever work. And then you end up right back where you started in a few weeks. But if you really think long term, like not in terms of weeks and months, but in terms of years and decades, you can make massive changes. You just need to be willing to commit and go even ridiculously slow. Um, a simple example from my life is I'd had a shoulder injury for several years and was injured. Couldn't, I lost a lot of strength. I could barely do one push-up. And 42 months ago, I started doing one push-up a day. Just one. Seems like the dumbest thing in the world. What good is one push-up going to do you, right? It's like that's like walking for 10 seconds. Like, okay,
Doesn't sound
you know,
dumb to me. Sounds great, but keep
but yeah,
going.
but like, you feel silly, like, all right, I'm doing my push-up. not even plural, and you do one and then you're done. But the next month I did two a day, and the next month I did three a day, and it was so slow and steady that neither my brain nor my body put up enough resistance to make me quit. And now I'm doing 42 a day, and there's really no end in sight. And it's only possible because I was thinking really long term.
Really long term. And I have an opposing story for you that makes yours even wiser. Um, Somebody had said, you ought to work on your upper body strength a bit more. It was during the pandemic when yoga
Hmm.
classes and such were a little bit off. And
Yeah.
so I thought, I'm going to get right and start doing my push-ups in this push-up bar here. And I thought, I'll
Hmm.
do exactly what I used to do. And I
Hmm.
hurt my shoulder.
Yep.
By day 3, I hurt my shoulder and I was out of commission on that shoulder for probably 3 to 4 weeks. So slow is definitely better. Like you
Yeah.
said, so I'm with you. My story is the one of what not to do. Your story is
Hmm.
definitely the one. And if somebody's telling you, oh, one's insignificant, hey, if it's significant to you, that's what matters.
Hmm.
And the other thing that I really like that you brought in just as a last piece, that push-up had meaning to you.
Hmm.
It had meaning because it was about healing. It was
Yeah.
about getting. So if somebody's telling us give up sugar or give up junk food find meaning, listeners. Find
Hmm.
something meaningful for you. If it means looking at some research to see the long-term health, benefits of giving up alcohol or the benefits of giving up sugar or reducing sugar, whatever it is, find something that is meaningful to you. And if
Hmm.
that meaning comes from this little or big voice inside saying, I just want to live a healthier life, that's plenty of meaning right there. If that little voice is saying, I want to work to get stronger and clean out my system, kudos to you, because
Hmm.
that's what this journey in life is all about, evolving forward one step at a time in that imperfect, beautiful way. So, my goodness, Chris, where can our listeners find you?
My primary home on the internet is becomingbetter.org.
Becomingbetter.org. Thank you, Chris. And our guest's name, I'll spell it for you, listener, is Chris Loper, Loper. And he is also, Chris, before we get off, could you just tell us just a tiny bit about wood floats and other brilliant observations? That's your book.
Yeah,
Tell
that
us a
is
little bit about wood floats.
that is uh, a pandemic project. That is my well, it's a humorous memoir. So it's really a collection of stories from my childhood and my early adulthood of pretty much all the stupid things I did. And then the little nuggets of wisdom that came along the way.
Isn't that the beauty of doing silly and stupid things in life? If we're wise, we can turn around and not
Hmm.
blame or shame ourselves, but
Yeah.
find those little nuggets of gold because they're there. They're
Hmm.
there if we only pause to notice them and pick them up and put them in our pocket or in our heart. Well, thank you, Chris. It has been such a pleasure and a joy.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And to our listeners, thank you so much for sharing your time and your devotion and your energy. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.